Welcome in. Belly up, have a seat, and grab a drink as we talk some Wingman Fantasy Football. Welcome on into another edition of Wingman Fantasy Football, the League Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Furley, and as always, I'd like to thank all of you, or any of you who may be watching or listening to today's show. It is Saturday, December 27th. This is episode 219, and it's time for our last-minute waiver wire show. In this show, we'll take a look at some last-minute help for your Week 17. We'll start off with some player news, take a glance at some of those waiver wire and free agent targets. We will feel the rage in this week's Mike Rant, and we'll preview the first 5 games of the remaining Week 17 slate. But before we do any of that, I'd like to make sure that everybody is in the room.
Wingmen assemble!
All right, now that everyone is here, obviously going to hear that I'm quite under the weather, so I'm going to do my best to get this out to you guys today. So let's start off with some player news. All right, we've got Jordan Love has already been ruled out with a concussion for the Green Bay Packers, leaving Malik Willis to lead the pack versus the Baltimore Ravens on Saturday. Although a secondary news item here, Malik Willis is listed as questionable with a shoulder injury. However, he is still expected to make the start. Christian Watson is also listed as questionable with a shoulder injury, as he did not practice earlier in the week, but he did miss Thursday with an illness. Josh Jacobs has been removed from the injury report and should be good to go for Week 17. Lamar Jackson is now listed as doubtful for Saturday's matchup against the Green Bay Packers, meaning Tyler Huntley will get the start if Jackson cannot go. Marvin Harrison Jr. is listed as questionable with the same heel injury that kept him out of Week 15. He did play through the same injury in Week 16, however, he was ineffective. Calvin Austin, Pittsburgh wide receiver, has already been ruled out with a hamstring injury. If you couple that with DK Metcalf, who had his 2-game suspension hold up after an altercation with a fan in Week 16, meaning they're going to be very slim in their wide receiver core for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. In that same game against the Cleveland Browns, David Njoku has already been ruled out for Week 17. Harold Fannin and Dylan Sampson are both listed as questionable. So now with Njoku out and Judkins already been placed on IR after that awful injury just last week, there may be some room for Reheim Sanders and Trayveon Williams to get some work in the Cleveland backfield. Bashal Tutin is listed as questionable for the Jacksonville Jaguars with a finger injury. That same injury kept him out last week, although he's trending towards making a return in Week 17. Kayshon Boutte. Kayshon Boutte and Mac Hollins have both been ruled out for Week 17. Perhaps this is a sneaky start here for Stephon Diggs against the New York Jets. Trayveon Henderson, running back for the Patriots, who was knocked out of last week's game with a concussion, is listed as questionable at the moment, and it looks like he's trending towards getting back on the field as he did shed the non-contact jersey late in the practice week. Mason Taylor, tight end for the Jets, is out once again, and officially, who cares? Alvin Kamara, who was never officially placed on the IR, will be out once again, missing his 5th consecutive game. Chris Olave is listed as questionable as he's dealing with the same back injury that he's been dealing with the past several weeks. However, he has not missed any game time due to this ailment and has been thriving as of late. Brock Bowers, Las Vegas tight end, was placed on the IR and will not play in Week 17. In both Buffalo tight ends, Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox are both listed as questionable ahead of the team's Week 17 matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. And Rome Odunze is out once again for the Chicago Bears. While Ricky Pearsall, who is listed as questionable with a knee injury, and it appears he's going to be a game-time decision. Similar to George Kittle, who left Week 16 with an ankle injury, listed as questionable as of now for Week 17. Kittle has yet to practice this week, which means there's a decent chance he's going to miss. However, right now he is still listed as a game-time decision with about 40 hours left to go. Devontae Adams has yet to practice this week as he deals with a hamstring injury that kept him out of last week's Week 16 game. With a Monday night game on the schedule for the Rams, you should definitely have, at the very least, a backup insurance option at Monday night game, or consider playing a team from one of the Sunday slate of games here, because I honestly don't think Devontae Adams is going to play. But if you want to hold out as long as possible, have some sort of backup plan ready to go in that game. All right, now it's time to take a look at our waiver wire targets.
Wingman Fantasy Football Waiver Wire Target.
All right, guys, we know we're late in the week here. We already had 3 games take place on Christmas Day, so we have a little bit less to go through here. The first run of waivers is done, but we still have opportunities here either to desperation backups on our team or looking for players to pick up to block potential opponents and limit their opportunities to have options going into this final championship week. Because there's games on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday remaining of the week here, we can strategically pick up and drop some players here one day at a time to try and maximize the amount of blocks that we may do against our opponents. So let's start with some guys in that Saturday slate of games. We've got Malik Willis versus Baltimore, with Jordan Love already knocked out here and not going to play. Jordan Love manager might have to go to Malik Willis. If he hasn't already picked him up, I would pick him up this morning, and once that game time kicks off, go ahead and drop him. I don't know what the rules are in your particular league here. You might have to wait till the next day to drop him, but nonetheless, get ahead of these guys. So I would pick up Malik Willis and Snoop Huntley in that same game, as these are guys you could do for one-day blocks and drop them and continue your blocking going forward from there. Other guys out there that are going to get the start this week: Tyler Shough at Tennessee, Phillip Rivers versus Jacksonville, and Cam Ward versus the Saints. I don't think any of these guys are people we can pick up to start. These are just blocks if your opponent is in desperation mode and falling asleep going into the weekend here. Phillip Rivers did okay last week, but I don't know. I could see this falling off here. He's gonna break sooner than later here. Tyler Shough is the best of these quarterbacks. However, there's a decent chance they might be featuring Taysom Hill through the rest of the season here, capping some of the upside of Tyler Shough. So none of these guys are people I'm picking up are for my team to play, unless you've got the Jordan Love or Lamar Jackson. And if so, pick up a backup right now. Honestly, I'd probably go Malik Willis over Snoop Huntley, but they're pretty close. They're pretty tied. The matchup's difficult for both, and Malik Willis is the home team in that particular matchup. On to our running backs. I've got a long list here. They're not all playable. I've only got 1 or 2 guys on this list that are playable, and some of these guys are block candidates. Let's start with the most obvious here. He's probably not available in your league, but if he is, I would definitely snag him. If not to play him, definitely to block. Rhamondre Stevenson versus the New York Jets, a very plus matchup. Although the news is now a little bit better on Trayveon Henderson's return, we'll see what they do in terms of putting him out there to potentially trying to keep him healthy for going forward. Even if both guys are active, Stevenson is most likely going to be the goal line back in a game where they should be able to score pretty easily. Jawhar Jordan, I'm not looking to start this week, although I think he's pretty good. But Woody Marks is off the injury report, so they're going to have all 3 of their running backs here. It is a tough matchup against the Chargers, so Jawhar Jordan is not someone I'm looking to pick up to play. Audric Estime, this one's interesting. He is now the starting running back for the New Orleans Saints. They had a great matchup last week, but if you listen to our 2-point conversation, we saw how they were really featuring players like Taysom Hill. Now, I don't know if this was because it was their last home game of the season or if they're going to ride out the featuring here of some fan favorite teams going out through the rest of the season. So this is a little tricky here. It's a decent matchup against Tennessee. It is on the road. Audric Estime, I don't have much confidence in because I'm just not sure how they're going to use Taysom Hill, as he really is the wild card capping our other options on the offense here. Now for players that we actually can pick up to play, not just block. We've got the Arizona running backs, both Michael Carter and Emari Demercado, up against Cincinnati, who gives up the most points to the running back position. The problem here is Arizona can't run the ball, but Michael Carter gets the majority of the work here. I always kind of try to lean towards the pass catching back here, but it just hasn't been fruitful here as Carter's been getting most of the work by far and most of the goal line work whenever they get there. This is a potentially sneaky game for Carter to be a championship streaming option here. He is someone I would pick up to play depending on the holes in your lineup. For other players here you might want to pick up and consider playing and or using as block players. Man, pardon my voice. I apologize. In that same Cincinnati-Arizona game, Semaje Perine has scored a touchdown in, I think, the last 2 games, if not 3, for Arizona. Chase Brown has been getting the bigger stats, but Semaje Perine has been on the field just as often. In a game where they might get ahead, Cincinnati that is, they might use Perine more as the salt away the clock running back, as Chase Brown is more a pass-catching type running back. Now we've got 3 players in the Cleveland backfield, which means you can't really play any of these guys with confidence. I've got Reheim Sanders, Dylan Sampson, Trayveon Williams. We already mentioned Jerome Ford was placed on IR 2 weeks back. We had Kinshon Junkins had that awful injury last week. He's obviously out for the rest of the year. So now we're down to 3 players. Dylan Sampson has missed the last 2 weeks. He's listed as questionable. I'm not sure if he's going to play or not. Nonetheless, he's a third down type back. I could see Reheim Sanders being the most valuable back in terms of goal line carries and stuff like that. They're playing against Pittsburgh, who, despite not being the best matchup, is up and down. Sometimes they do give up a lot of stats to the running backs, and other times they just shut down the running backs like they did last week with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So it's a little bit of a pick 'em here, but if you needed to pick up somebody to start an emergency of the 3 Cleveland Brown running backs, I would go Reheim Sanders. Obviously, that's a risky play in your championship week, but if you're down to nothing and those are the last 3 guys going and you need somebody, I would go with Sanders with a chance for the touchdown. All right, now over to our receivers and tight ends. I'm grouping these guys together. Darren Waller is now rated as the 7th highest scoring tight end in terms of points per game, up against Tampa Bay in a plus matchup. You have to have trust in Quinn Ewers here, which is hard to do, but Darren Waller is honestly the number 1 or 1B at the worst receiving option for the Miami Dolphins against Tampa Bay. Tyler Warren, if he's out there for Indianapolis against Jacksonville, has not been doing quite well with Phillip Rivers, but he had a ton of targets last week, and Phillip Rivers missed him on a couple opportunities for a touchdown here. And it seems like Rivers doesn't stick with the same guys from game to game, as it was Josh Downs in his first game, then it was Alec Pierce in his second game, maybe Tyler Warren or Michael Pittman in his third game. Taysom Hill, this guy is so interesting. This is someone I don't think I have the cojones to put in my starting lineup, but I sure as heck don't want to see him on the other side of my matchup. He terrifies me as a potential opponent, as he can score in a multitude of ways or not at all. I want him on my bench to keep him away from my opponent. I don't want to see this guy in an opposing manager's lineup. No way, no how. I would actually pick him up and just use this as a block because I am scared to death of this guy and not confident enough to start him on my own. When breaking down the matchup here, the matchup is not good, but we already mentioned in Pittsburgh we are going to be without Calvin Austin and without DK Metcalf. Adam Thielen is my choice to be the number 1 wide receiver this week for Pittsburgh at Cleveland. Again, if this was a better matchup, I almost had Adam Thielen as my start of the week, but it's just too tough of a matchup against Cleveland in Cleveland. Nonetheless, if Aaron Rodgers is going to throw 2 touchdowns, one of them is definitely, in my opinion, going to Adam Thielen. And then we have Michael Mayer, tight end for the Las Vegas Raiders. Not a great player here, but it's a good matchup against the Giants. And now Brock Bowers is on the IR. Just an emergency option here. So these guys, I would pick up Darren Waller and Tyler Warren as potential starts. Taysom Hill as a keep away because I am just deathly afraid. Adam Thielen, if you are living dangerously, I think he's actually going to have a sneaky good game. And Michael Mayer, I really have no concerns one way or the other. Now for some kickers here, we're looking at Evan McPherson, Cincinnati kicker, up against Arizona. Blake Grupe, Indianapolis kicker, against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Blake Grupe is playing inside. Chad Ryland is against the Arizona Cardinals. That game is probably going to be like 45-39 at the minimum. There's going to be a chance for a ton of extra points at least, and maybe a couple field goals to make both these kickers really strong plays in Chad Ryland and McPherson. And then Ben Sauls is now kicking for the Giants. They're playing in Las Vegas, so it's inside against one of the worst defenses in the league. and also a team that is sitting all of their best defensive players as is. Ben Sauls and Chad Ryland are my sneaky streaming starts at the kicker position. Now for defenses here, there's one or two good matchups, but all these are just kind of see what you have left here. I got New Orleans versus Tennessee, and I also have Tennessee versus New Orleans. I don't know how this game's going to go. Tennessee has scored 24 or more points in the last 3 games. However, it's pretty hard to trust their output here. New Orleans defense has been playing better. I just don't know how this game's going to go, but these are two offenses that aren't overly prolific in tendencies to make mistakes. So I have them both here as emergency streams, but I don't love the matchups. It's just not bad matchups. Here's the one I'm looking at most, though. New York Giants versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Last week, the Giants played against Minnesota, who at the time gave up the most points to the to opposing defenses, and they came through with a 12-point fantasy day. And the New York Giants themselves are the 31st ranked defense in terms of fantasy points per game. But now Las Vegas has now moved ahead. They are the easiest matchup for opposing fantasy defenses here. So the Giants versus Las Vegas has a very chance for them to finish off the season as one of the best defenses in terms of fantasy points throughout the fantasy playoffs. So very interesting here. Even though they're rated very low, they're ending the season on some super good matchups. We got Cincinnati at Arizona. I feel like Arizona's they were doing good in terms of scoring for so long, but I think they're running out of steam. In Cincinnati, they just want to have the feel good here. Arizona's trying to lose. Cincinnati is trying to just get the feel good back. I think Cincinnati is going to destroy Arizona, and there might be a defensive score here as well. And then Pittsburgh at Cleveland. I'm a little nervous here, but Shedeur Sanders, we always know, has a chance to make a few mistakes, especially taking some long sacks to help keep the total yards low. And they're already going to be without David Njoku, for example, and their 2 main running backs. So there's a chance that Cleveland might not do anything at all, although they are playing in Cleveland. All right, guys, it is now time for our last of the season. It's time for a Mike Rant.
Baby Rant, Karen Rant, Monty. I don't care whose fault it is. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think.
Mike Rant.
All right, I mentioned it last week a little bit here. All right, so this is what we got going on here. Let's see what we got. Kind of lost my place. All right, I'm going with referee Carl Cheffers. It sounds like a fake name. It sounds like a buddy from the Archie comics, Carl Cheffers. All right, let's start with his Week 16. He was the referee in that Pittsburgh at Detroit, where they called the 3 pass interferences on the last drive, including 2 offensive pass interferences on Detroit, keeping them out of the end zone for the go-ahead score. The calls themselves weren't wrong, but his problem is his ability to communicate at a starting point. He comes in and tells them that a touchdown was scored, even though there was no signal on the field for a touchdown score. Amon-Ra St. Brown was stopped prior to the goal line, went backwards 4 yards before he pitched it. I don't know how many times this play was not a touchdown, and then came in to say that the offensive pass interference negates any of the rulings on the field after that. Therefore, touchdown is scored, nullified due to penalty, game over, see ya, I'm out. The worst way to communicate this, just say there's an offensive pass interference call, and by rule, the game is over. You don't have to say that the game ended in a touchdown, especially because no one even called it a touchdown on the field. You guys just let the play go because you didn't know what the heck was going on. This guy is awful. And I didn't really recognize him until I already had him in the back of my head from the week prior. Week 15 of the same season, Tampa Bay at Atlanta. I wish I could remember all of the plays, but again, it was about his inability to communicate with the TV audience and the crowd in the stands. He had the call where Kyle Pitts' butt hit the inside of the end zone while his elbow simultaneously hit the outside of the end zone. He just kind of muttered and said touchdown. There's another play or two on that same drive as the Tampa Bay Bucs are trying to come back that he would just throw a flag, and they would just spot the ball and not tell you what happened, tell you what down it was, who it was on. He was just really bad at communicating. And then as I looked up this guy, noticing he's had 2 weeks in a row that caught my attention. This guy has a long history of being baffling mistakes. Week 9 of the same season, with the Chiefs down by 8 points late in the third quarter, called an intentional grounding on Patrick Mahomes that forced him to fumble and give the ball away on a play that was clearly tipped by the defensive lineman, therefore negating any intentional grounding. However, it was unreviewable to check if the ball was tipped due to a penalty based on intentional grounding. You can review if it's tipped for a penalty for pass interference, but not intentional grounding. I don't understand. If you can review it for a penalty one way, why can't you review it for another penalty? Being that whether or not those penalties hold up are indicative of whether the ball was tipped. So this guy has a tough go here against the Chiefs, which I don't feel bad for the Chiefs, but nonetheless. And then in 2023, in Week 14, if you don't remember, the Bills again at the Chiefs. This was the game where the Kansas City Chiefs threw the ball to Travis Kelce. He lateraled it. I'm not sure who got it. I think Xavier Worthy maybe. And they scored the go-ahead touchdown in the final minute of the game, only to be called back for Kadarius Toney lining up off sides. When Kadarius Toney looked over to the ref and said, "Am I good?" and they did not respond, and then called off the penalty. And his reasoning afterwards was, if the game wasn't as close, we would have not even called it. If you're not going to call it in a close game or in a blowout, why would you call it in a close game? It's the same thing. This guy makes no sense when he tries to explain himself over and over again. And we can go back as far as 2015. Carl Cheffers, remember this guy. If you see a bad play this week, there's a pretty good chance we know which ref is involved. In 2015, Week 13, Green Bay at Detroit. One of the famous Hail Mary games by Aaron Rodgers. They won the game on a Hail Mary. It was a 60-yard pass, a clean catch and throw by Aaron Rodgers, but it was an untimed down as the play before, as the Packers were lateraling the ball in desperation mode. Aaron Rodgers ended up with the ball back in his hands, gets tackled, and they call a face mask on the defensive end who tackled him as he touched his face mask, removed his hand, and tackled him by the shoulder, not inside the collar, but literally just pushed him down by the shoulder as Rodgers, as he went down, tucked his chin into that shoulder to make it look like a face mask. There are reviews all over the place. The guy did not pull the face mask. This guy, not only does he call, not only does he call these plays wrong, but they're pivotal games and one-score games at the end of games, and his communication skills are awful. Carl Cheffers, you are my final Mike Rant of the 2025 season. All right, guys, now it's time to get into our NFL game breakdown and preview, as we're going to get into the first 5 games of the slate following, of course, our Thursday games. In this one, we're going to go over the Houston Texans at the LA Chargers, Baltimore Ravens at Green Bay Packers, Arizona Cardinals at Cincinnati Bengals, and the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cleveland Browns. And we're going to finish up this Week 17 preview with the New Orleans Saints at the Tennessee Titans. All right, I've been working on a new matrix here, trying to help me determine which guys to play, which guys to sit. I've got them broken down into 5 designations here after I do crunch the numbers here. A must play, that's where you have an elite player in a good matchup. A should play, where you have a good player in a good matchup. Another should play is when you have an elite player in a neutral matchup. Our next phase are could plays. These are guys who are going to be in your lineup but we want to look for other options before we lock in these guys. So they're probably going to play for you. However, we don't want to blindly put them in. People who fall into the could play category are elite players with tough matchups, good players in neutral matchups, and okay to weak players in very plus matchups. Then we have our should sit categories with good players in tough matchups and okay to weak players in neutral matchups. And our must sit are okay to weak players in tough matchups. What makes a player elite, good, okay, or weak? Well, we'll just do this real quick. In terms of positions like running back and wide receiver, where there are multiple players that we play at that position, an elite player is a top 8 player. A good player is a top 24, so a running back 2. An okay player is someone in the top 40 at their position, and a weak player is anybody outside the top 40. Obviously, closer to the top 60 is what we're looking for here. If they've been hot, I'll give them a +8 rank bump just to follow the trend here. Now for players that are single players that are lineups like quarterbacks, tight ends, kickers, and defenses, an elite player comes in as a top 5 at their position. A good player is top 12. Okay is top 20. and then weak is anyone after that. A good matchup is a team that is a top 9 matchup. A tough matchup is a bottom 9, and neutral is anywhere else in between. That's just a long way to get you into how I'm breaking this down. And every once in a while, I'll put a little bit of a gut feeling to bump these guys up or down if the matrix isn't where I like it. All right, so our first game we're going to break down here is the Houston Texans at 10-5 up against the LA Chargers at 11-4. Both these guys are trending towards a playoff, but a big game nonetheless. This game is at Saturday at 4:30 p.m. The over-under is 39.5, and the LA Chargers are a home favorite at -1.5. These defenses are both great. And after doing the matrix, I only see 2 green players, and they're both special teamers. So I'm going to go with the under in this game. And because it's so close, I'm going to take the LA Chargers to cover and win based upon them being at home. Other than that, this is a pretty even good game. All right, let's start on the Houston Texans side of the ball, as they're playing against the Chargers, who give up the 4th fewest to quarterback, 8th fewest to running back, 4th fewest to wide receiver, 7th fewest to tight ends, 14th fewest to kickers, and 10th most to defenses. So as you can see, this is a tough matchup for all of our offensive players, which really indicates whether or not we're going to play these guys. So I got C.J. Stroud, who's rated at number 30 in terms of points per game for quarterback, being that he is a weaker quarterback in a tough matchup. He's going to be a must-sit. I mean, anything can happen here, but in terms of the matrix here, we should not expect anything from C.J. Stroud. He's a must-sit. Woody Marks is ranked as the 37th running back in points per game. Again, this is an okay matchup, an okay player in a tough matchup. This is going to come down as a between a should sit and must sit. He is the main running back, assuming his health anyway. But nonetheless, they've got 3 running backs that are going to miss in with Jawhar Jordan and Nick Chubb. So any one of these guys might get the random touchdown here. I've got Woody Marks as a must sit. I'll give him the bump a little bit to a should sit, which means we're looking to find other options if we can. Nico Collins is not quite elite, as he's in the 9th ranked overall receiver in terms of points per game. So in terms of our matrix here, as a tough matchup, he is a should sit, but because he's so close to our elite players, and because 3 games have already gone by, I'm going to give him the wingman bump as a could play, which means he most likely will be in your lineup, but we want to scour our lineup and the waiver wire for better options, as this is going to be a tougher matchup for Nico Collins. Dalton Schultz rated as 16th in terms of points per game for tight end. In a tough matchup, he is a should sit. Kaime Fairbairn, the 2nd ranked kicker in a neutral matchup, is a should start. Defense for the Houston Texans is number 3 rated, and a neutral matchup is also a should start. On the other side of the ball for the LA Chargers up against the Houston Texans, again, another strong defense. The Texans give up the 2nd fewest points to quarterbacks, 9th fewest points to running backs, 2nd fewest points to Ladd McConkey, 12th fewest points to the tight end, and they give up the fewest points to the kicker position while giving up the 9th fewest to the defense. There is not one positive matchup, only one neutral matchup against the Houston Texans, and that is the tight end. All right, so Justin Herbert, ranked as number 10 in terms of points per game, is a should sit. He has kind of been up and down, and you can kind of tell when he's going to have a good game. He plays good against Dallas and bad against, I forget the last team he played against, he didn't do so well. So, again, he's a good player. He can always do something here, but this matchup is one of the toughest in the league. He is a should sit. Emari Hampton has been playing much better lately. He's the 17th rated running back in terms of points per game. That puts him as a good player in a tough matchup. I have him as a should sit. I'm going to give him the wingman bump as a could play, as with Kamani Vidal banged up, uncertain of his role right now. Emari Hampton is going to finish off the year here as the workhorse running back for the Chargers. So in terms of our matrix, he's a should sit. I'm going to give him a bump up, as a running back always has a chance to get a touchdown, especially one of Emari Hampton's stature and his snap count. Ladd McConkey's been struggling, except last week where he was my start of the week due to the matchup. We're not going to trust him as rebounding. That was a game against Dallas. That's what we played against. This week they're playing against the Houston Texans. Already mentioned it, 2nd hardest defense for wide receivers. And Ladd McConkey is outside the top 30 in terms of wide receivers and points per game. He is a must sit this week, Ladd McConkey. And while we're here with McConkey and his receivers, that means all the receivers are must sits. Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen as well. Rhamondre Stevenson is someone you could play. He's been trending not very successful, so I'd be looking for other options for sure. But in terms of the matrix, he's a top 18 tight end in a neutral matchup. So we got neutral, neutral. We're going to look for other options out there, but don't stress, you can play him. And Cam Dicker is the 5th best kicker in terms of points per game, but this is the toughest matchup. But the way I do it here, when you have an elite player, which Cam Dicker is a top 5 player at his position, even in the toughest matchup, we're going to put him as a could play. We're going to look for some better options, but he's just too good to go out of our way to sit. The defense for Houston is, the defense for the Chargers are the 20th best in terms of scoring, and they're playing against a team because of the 9th fewest. This should sit for the Chargers defense as well. And Kamani Vidal, not sure of his role right now. He's also banged up. We just want to stay away from him right now. He's a must sit, mostly because the matchup isn't great. His role is decreasing, and he's banged up. There's 3 strikes, and you're out for Kamani Vidal. On to our next game. This game's also on Saturday. This one's at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We have the Baltimore Ravens at 7-8, heading into Green Bay, who are at 9-5-1. Is that right? 9-5-1. So we have, what do we have here? So the over-under is kind of low at 38.5, as we might have 2 backup quarterbacks in this game, most likely. And Green Bay is favored by 3.5 at home. This one's kind of tough here because there's a lot of variables here with the quarterbacks. I'm going to stick with the home teams. I think Green Bay is the better team between these two, but we don't know. Derrick Henry can always have one of those dominating performances, but I'm going to go with Green Bay to cover and win this game. And I have it going over, surprisingly. It's 38.5. It's kind of low, and these defenses aren't super elite, at least combined. There's a chance that one of these teams, if not both, will score around 20 points or more. All right, let's go to the Baltimore Ravens side of the ball. Their matchups this week against the Green Bay defense, who give up the 10th fewest to quarterback, 16th fewest to running back, 14th most to wide receiver, 9th fewest to tight end, 12th fewest to the kicker, and the 2nd fewest to opposing defenses here. So we have Lamar Jackson, who is doubtful right now. So let's just put Tyler Huntley in there, who's actually rated as, well, I amended it here because he didn't play the whole game last time, and he's come in a couple fourth quarters. So I just took his he had one start, and I put him in. So he's the 24th rated quarterback in terms of points per game per start is how I did it here. So he is, So at 24, he is a weaker quarterback in a neutral matchup. He's a should sit here unless you're desperate and need to play. Derrick Henry, a top 11 running back in a neutral matchup. He is a could play this week. Honestly, you're not looking to get him out of your lineup, but we just want to comb through our rosters and comb through the waiver wire. But Derrick Henry is going to be in your lineup. Zay Flowers has really been turning it on. He is now up to the 18th rated wide receiver in points per game in a neutral matchup against Green Bay. Green Bay is much better. Well, not much better. They're better against the run than they are the pass. Zay Flowers is a could play. It's hard to trust Baltimore's receiving game, but he has been quite effective as of late. Mark Andrews, we can't trust this guy. It's also a tough matchup. We cannot play. We must sit Andrews and Likely. These guys might do anything, but you're just throwing darts at the wall hoping for something at this point. They've had the best matchups, and they haven't come through. I don't expect them to come through in a tougher matchup this week. Tyler Loop is not the greatest kicker in terms of points per game in a neutral matchup. He also is a should sit. Baltimore defense is a should sit as well. All right, on the other side of the ball, we've got the Green Bay Packers up against the Baltimore Ravens defense, who give up the 12th most to quarterbacks, 14th most to running backs, 4th most to wide receivers, 8th fewest to tight ends, 5th most to kickers, and 14th most to opposing defenses. So Jordan Love is already out, which means Malik Willis, who's questionable, is expected to start. Again, I don't have a rating for him, obviously, because he hasn't played too much this year. It's a neutral matchup. I think I would play Malik Willis over Tyler Huntley, mostly being at home, and also because the matchup is a good 8 slots easier. So in that regard, I would have him as a should sit nonetheless. But if you're wavering between these guys who are desperation plays, I'd move Malik Willis towards the top of your desperate players. Josh Jacobs, an elite running back in a neutral matchup, is a should play. He's off the injury report. Hopefully all things are good to go, and he should return to form, especially with Malik Willis here. They're probably going to lean on the running game just even that much more. I got Christian Watson here right now listed as questionable. I expect him to play as he did practice earlier in the week and only missed Thursday due to an illness. He is up to the 21st rated receiver in terms of points per game, but this is a really, really, really good matchup against Baltimore, who gives it the 4th most points. I'm putting Christian Watson as a should play this week, as he's been the most consistent when healthy, getting opportunities here in the passing game. And he's also good at catching shorter passes and making plays off them as well. If Malik Willis can't hit the long ball. Luke Musgrave simply has not stepped up in the absence of Tucker Kraft. He is a must-sit. McManus, you could play. It's a good matchup for kickers here. He's been up and down himself, but this is a could play in terms of kicker. The defense for the Packers have really not been good all year in terms of fantasy points. They are a should-sit. Matthew Golden, we can't trust, even though it's a good matchup. He is just down the line in the pecking order. So Matthew Golden, they should sit just based on where he fits in on his team. And Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed are both good plays this week as your last flexes here. Again, the matchup is just really good against Baltimore in terms of receivers. So I'm looking to Christian Watson, I think, is a should play and will probably be your wide receiver 2 to flex. And then Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed could be your last flex as you comb through your roster with these could play type of players. All right, our next game on the docket. Oh, this one might be kind of fun here. We got the Arizona Cardinals heading into Cincinnati. Arizona is 3-12. Bengals are 5-10. The over-under is 53.5 points, and Cincinnati is favored by 7. Arizona with that 3 wins in their season that really have a chance to play the draft order game here. They need to lose as many games as possible, while Cincinnati with those 5 wins are pretty much locked in that 7-12 range in terms of pick, while Arizona can go anywhere from 1 to 6 kind of thing. So Arizona's going to try to lose this game, but they have great matchups. So that just because they might lose doesn't mean they're not going to score. There is so much green on both sides of this ball here. I'm going over the 53.5. I'm taking Cincinnati to win. However, I'm going to have Arizona cover this, as I don't think Cincinnati can win by more than 7. We'll see how it breaks down. All right, let's get to the Arizona side here. Oh, this is really fun no matter how you look at it. Cincinnati gives it the 3rd most to quarterbacks, the most to running backs. They are pretty good against wide receivers, although I just think that's because teams choose the other options before they go to the wide receiver. They also give up the most points to tight ends. They give the 11th fewest to kickers and 3rd most to defenses. This is why I had the Cincinnati defense as a streaming defense this week. All right, Jacoby Brissett ranked as number 14 in terms of points per game. Finally had a dud last week after being in the top 12 in his first 7 or 8 starts. Again, this is a could play, but I'm giving the Wingman fantasy bump as this matchup is just too good. This is going to be a revolving door of scores going up and down the field, I believe. So I'm going to give Jacoby Brissett the bump. He's going to get into my top 12 this week. Michael Carter. We talk about these guys every week, but they don't show up too well. This is because the running game in and of itself for Arizona is not good, but this is the absolute best matchup out there. Due to the matrix here, I've got Michael Carter as a could play. I too am going to give him the wingman bump to a should play. He should be your highest flex, or maybe even a running back too, depending on your roster configuration. Michael Wilson's been playing quite well, although this is the tougher side of the matchup as they give up the 6th fewest points. With that being said, I have him as a should sit, but I would not be afraid to put him in. I would just downgrade him in terms of where he should be. I'd rather play. That's close. Would you play Carter or Wilson? I'm going with Carter, but I wouldn't fight you either way. So they're kind of in that guaranteed last flex to a consideration for a last flex. But if you like Wilson in this game, I wouldn't fight you. Trey McBride, the number 1 scoring tight end, and again in the game that gives up against the defense that gives up the most points at tight ends. I don't know how it's going to go. It just seems like this is green, as dark as you can get it. Trey McBride, after his first dud in a long time last week, should rebound quite nicely and have a strong game. Chad Ryland has not been the best kicker in a neutral matchup, so honestly, the Matrix has him as a should sit. I'm going to give him the wingman fantasy bump to a could play as a streaming kicker. Arizona defense I have as a could play, although Budda Baker is out this week, which he's their most versatile defender. So again, it's about the matchup, but they are going to be down some of their best players. Marvin Harrison Jr. looks like he's going to get back on the field, although we're not positive of that as of yet. I mean, he did play last week, so that's why I'm thinking he should play. Nonetheless, he only comes in there to nerf the ceiling of Michael Wilson, as he himself doesn't seem to take advantage of the situation here. Being that's a tougher matchup for Marvin Harrison, who I don't trust. I have him as a should sit. I'm not giving him the same bump that I'm giving Michael Wilson. And Emari Demercado, again, this matchup, the most points given up to running backs. I'm going to have him as a emergency flex. You could play Emari Demercado. If you want to go for the glory in your championship, this would be the time to do it. Although it's a ballsy play. I don't know if I could personally do it, but in terms of how we have these guys ranked, he falls into line as a back end flex. On the other side of the ball, the Cincinnati Bengals up against the Arizona defense, who give up the 15th fewest to quarterbacks, but they give up the second most to running backs. 14th fewest to receivers, 8th most to tight ends, 2nd most to kickers, and 7th most to defenses. Joe Burrow is a could play. Again, the wingman bump. He came through last week for me in a similar situation. I'm going to put him as a should start for Joe Burrow. Chase Brown is a should start in the easy matchup. Jamar Chase, as an elite player, you're never going to sit him, but with a neutral matchup, he is a should play. Mike Gesicki, you could play. We saw how he performed last week in a similar matchup against the Miami Dolphins in terms of strength of schedule. So Mike Gesicki can be in your lineup again. Evan McPherson honestly should be in your lineup this week. He's going to be a top 5 kicker, in my opinion. Cincinnati defense is a sneaky, Arizona defense you could also stream as Cincinnati gives up the 7, or Arizona, wait, hold on. Oh, I did that wrong before. Cincinnati could be in your lineup. They're against Arizona because of the 7th most. On the other side of the ball, you could play Arizona because Cincinnati gives up the 3rd most. So both these guys are plus matchups here. They're both middling defenses to back-end defenses. But in this time of year, we're playing matchups. And these guys can be willy-nilly with the ball, just trying to score as often as possible and making mistakes in the meantime. T. Higgins is a could play. Honestly, he's in your lineup this week. And Semaje Perine, again, with a monster matchup, there's room for both of these running backs to have good games for the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, we have 2 games left to finish out this particular rundown here. Our next one is the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into Cleveland. Pittsburgh's at 9-6. Cleveland's at 3-12. The over-under is 33.5, and Pittsburgh is favored by -3 points. I'm going with the over on this one, and I'm taking Pittsburgh to win and cover. On the Pittsburgh side, they're playing against those Cleveland defenders who give up the 3rd fewest to the quarterback, 16th fewest to running back, 3rd fewest to wide receiver, 14th fewest to the tight end, 15th fewest to kicker, and the 5th most to the defense. So in this case, we're going to look to sit Aaron Rodgers. We're going to play Jaylen Warren as a could play. Adam Thielen, I have him as the Matrix as a should sit, but I'm giving him the personal wingman. I got the Goosey's feeling he's going to have a better game than expected. Adam Thielen will get the bump. He'll get the bump as a could play this week as a back-end flex, if you trust my opinion. Jonnu Smith is a should sit. Chris Boswell is a could play. The Pittsburgh defense is a should play. Kenneth Gainwell, just like Jaylen Warren, is also a could play. These guys have been very good all year long, especially Kenny Gainwell. On the other side of the ball, Shedeur Sanders. Honestly, this is a really good matchup against Pittsburgh's defense because of the 4th most to quarterbacks, 10th fewest to running backs, 5th most to receivers, 3rd most to tight ends, 12th most to kickers, 10th fewest to defenses. Shedeur Sanders can actually be in your lineup as a could play, a back-end quarterback in an emergency situation. He can be in your lineup this week. Reheim Sanders, I like the opportunity, but I just don't know how good he is here. It's a neutral matchup, but he himself is not that good. I'm going to put him as a should sit because you really just can't take the plunge here. But I do have him rated as my highest Cleveland running back if you have to go down that road. Jerry Jeudy has been a bust. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But the matchup is actually really good against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who give the 5th most points to receivers. I'm going to put Jerry Jeudy as a, whoa my goodness, I can't believe I'm doing this. Hold my nose. He is a could play this week. Harold Fannin has been great. The matchup is great. He's going to be in your lineup once again. Andre Smith, the kicker for the Browns, should be out. The Cleveland defense could be in. And Dylan Sampson, he's coming off that banged up here. I'm not even sure if he's going to play, to be honest with you. So I'm going to put him as a should sit based to the question marks on his health. And our last game we're going to go over is the New Orleans Saints heading into the Tennessee Titans. New Orleans Saints are on a 3-game winning streak at 5-10 up against the Tennessee Titans at 3-12. The over-under is 39.5. New Orleans is a road favorite at -2.5. I'm going to pick the over on this game. As Tennessee, it's hard to trust them, but they've scored 24 or more points in the last 3 games. New Orleans has been doing similar work here. This game is probably going to be like a 24-21 game, something like that. 24-17, anywhere in that range. Not sure which way it's going to go, but I've got Tennessee covering the 2.5, as I just can't see who's going to pull away here, but I do have New Orleans winning in a close game. So maybe a 23-21 type of game here. On the New Orleans side, we got Tyler Shough, who has been improving, although leveling off at the 34th rated quarterback in terms of points per game in a neutral matchup. He's been a decent streamer, but we're going to try and avoid this one. We're going to have him as a should sit. Audric Estime, I want to put him as a could play, but again, with this Taysom Hill, you just don't know how they're going to break down the goal line carries more specifically here. So the role and the matchup is a could play, although I would do that with much trepidation. Chris Olave has moved up to the 10th rated receiver in terms of points per game in a good matchup here. This is a could play. Honestly, I'm going to give him the bump to a should play. Juwan Johnson has been steady as the top 15 tight end, although he has been decreasing, especially with Taysom Hill getting more involved. I'm going to have him as a should sit, even though it's not a tough matchup. I just don't trust Juwan Johnson. They've really been hitting Chris Olave and using Taysom Hill a lot more lately. Charlie Smythe, the kicker for the New Orleans Saints, he's got a leg on him. They're going to give him an opportunity to kick some long field goals. A good kicker in a neutral matchup. He is a could play. New Orleans defense against the Tennessee Titans, who give up the 6th most points to opposing defenses, are a could play as well in that streaming range. And Taysom Hill, I have as a could play. I've got Breece Hall in my lineup right now in one of the tougher matchups against the New England Patriots. And if I decide to sit him at the last second, Taysom Hill is the guy I'm going to pick up to put in. Just trying to show you what we're looking at here. He is a risky play, a fun play, a glory play. If he comes through, you can talk about it all offseason. And if he doesn't, what are you going to say? He's a backup tight end. So I would definitely pick him up to block your opponent, as I don't want him on the other side. He scares me. I don't know if I can pull the trigger to put him in the lineup, but we talked about this in our waiver wire pickup. Taysom Hill is an interesting player coming down the stretch. All right, on the Tennessee side of the ball, the matchups here are the New Orleans Saints give the 7th fewest to quarterback, 15th most to running back, 7th fewest to receivers, 10th fewest to tight ends. They do give up the 8th most to both kickers and defenses. There's not a lot of good options here on the Tennessee Titans, so let's just go through it quick. There's no reason to talk about it too much. Cam Ward, must sit. Tony Pollard, could play. Alec Iomanner, must sit. Chick Okonkwo, should sit. Joey Sly, could play. Tennessee defense, could play. Tajay Spears, should sit. Jameer DK, must sit. Gunnar Helms, should sit. The only players we're considering even playing here for the Tennessee Titans are Tony Pollard, Joey Sly, and the Tennessee defense. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this late in the week, last-minute waiver wire show with a breakdown of our first preview of the remaining games for the week. Yes, my voice hurts as much as it sounds, so thank you for sticking with me and understanding all that. We're going to get 2 more shows out before Sunday morning here. And if you include the quickie, we'll get 3 more shows out. We're behind, but we're going to get all these shows out for you, as this will be our last weekend for our Wingman Fantasy Football, the League podcast. And with that being said, guys, I want to thank you all so much for joining us, to watching and or listening. We've had a very good year this year. We've expanded quite a bit. We're still learning some valuable lessons, and I thank you guys for joining us for the ride. Don't forget, you can find us on your favorite podcasting platforms to get our audio feeds. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and the Odyssey app. And if you find us there, just search Wingman the League, and we'll come to the top of your search. And while you're there, hit that follow button. Leave a 5-star rating, and go ahead and spread the word to your friends. That's how we get some new listeners. If you want to watch our show, we do have a YouTube channel at wingmanfantasyfootball.com/YouTube or youtube.com/@wingmanfantasyfootball. When you're there, guys, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, let me know of any of your start-sit questions. We'll get through these together here, as it is championship week, and sometimes the players we least expect to help us win championships do just that. All right, that being said, guys, may your glasses be full, your mugs stay frosty, and good luck in the championship, and we will see you next time.